Hey guys, welcome back to the video. Moonknight Season 1, Episode 1 just premiered on Disney+, and in this video, you guys, a spoiler review and breakdown of the show. So before we get into it, again, this is going to be fully spoilers. I'm going to be going through every single important part of this episode, breaking it down in depth for you guys. And also, you might notice my lighting is a little bit off. I apologize for that. Next video, it'll be back to normal. But again, in this video, we're going to be breaking down Season 1, Episode 1, the series premiere of Moonknight on Disney+. So this episode of Moonknight was my favorite series premiere of any Disney+ TV show we've ever gotten. That doesn't just include the Marvel Disney Plus shows. I think in general with the Mandalorian and stuff like that, in total, I think that Moonknight has the best first episode. And one of the biggest things was how well this episode started off, because it was just unsettling, and this entire episode as a whole was very, very unsettling. And we literally start off this episode with the character that we later find out to be Arthur, played by Ethan Hawke. He's literally just sitting there crushing glass and putting it into his sandals, and then he walks around. We see he's in the inside of a pyramid, and then it cuts to the infamous Marvel logo. It's just an absolutely weird and crazy intro, and it's very, very unsettling. But then we get our actual introduction to Steven, who's the main character of the show, of course, and again, it's still just very, very hectic. I think the entire beginning of this show is just hectic. This entire episode is really hectic for that matter, and I think it really works because this show is talking about the mental illnesses of someone that has dissociative identity disorder and stuff like that. And so I think the way this show is really starting off, it kind of puts us in the shoes of this character, because whenever he's in dreams, we don't know. Whenever he's in real life, we don't know. We can't really tell, just as the character can't tell. I was also surprised that they introduced Khonshu so early on in this episode. He's actually the voice that was in Steven's head. We actually end up seeing him later on in this episode when we see the elevator scene, as well as the scene at the very, very end, right before Steven actually turns into Moonknight himself. But I'll go into that later, because I do have to mention this absolutely insane dream sequence that we had. And honestly, I don't even know if it was a dream sequence or not. I'm very confused on a lot of the stuff in this episode. I'm making this video right after first watch. I'll probably watch it another time before next week's episode, but from what we know, this was somewhat of a dream sequence, because actually Steven was not trying to fall asleep, and then he kind of blinks and he completely goes into a different location. He's in the mountains of some place, and then he's two guys with machine guns start running at him, and this is where we see the first interaction between Steven and Ethan Hawke's character Arthur. And this is also where we find out that Ethan Hawke's character's name is Arthur, and he's basically a cult leader where he's kind of judging people's fates. And we see one person who's determined really well, they go on to live, but then one old lady, her fate isn't determined well, and she dies right there on the spot, losing all color in her body, and she just passes out. Ethan Hawke is the judger, I'm assuming. He kind of is the one that, since he's leading the cult, is deciding who is part of this mission and stuff like that. They're following the goddess of Amit, I think her name is, and we get more of this explained later in this episode as well. But I do have to mention, I love the Egyptian lore in this episode, and I'm really excited to see how they utilize it moving forward. Are they going to utilize just the cult lore, kind of what they explored later in this episode with everyone with the tattoos, or are they going to keep exploring Egyptian lore as a whole, like they did in the very beginning of this episode, where Steven was actually talking to that little girl about people in tombs and stuff like that. But back to the dream sequence, Ethan Hawke's character did want what's called the scarab, and that's like a little beetle type of thing. There's a little gem thing that we did see Mark holding, and Steven actually ends up like playing around with Arthur's character, where he's basically like tossing it back and forth between his hands, and every time he blinks it moves. And I think this is our first tease to obviously a different personality, which later in this episode we find out is Mark. But I think them blinking it so fast and going through these different motions so fast makes what happens next very jarring, and that's that next time that he blinks, when all of the dudes are running at him, he actually ended up killing all of them, and there is a lot of blood here. Now I know you guys probably are expecting like Daredevil, Punisher level blow when you hear it's a brutal show, it's the most brutal MCU show, but it's not like that level. They basically have the same kind of ending of those scenes where there's a lot of blood on the floor, a lot of blood covered with all these other people, but we don't see the action that leads to the blood, so we don't necessarily get to see that violence specifically. But to me, this was really enough, because we got that implied violence, we got that implied brutality, which honestly I don't really mind. I'm not going to complain about that, but I'm assuming that every time he blinked, he was in somewhat of a vulnerable position, because later on in the episode, Mark does say to Steven in the mirror, let go. So I'm assuming that Steven had some sort of letting go moment between those blinks, and that's why he ended up killing those 4 people. But then after that, we see Steven going on the chase sequence, and then there's 2 more cutaway scenes where one, I think he gets the gun from a car across from him, and then the other one he actually shoots a dude in the face, which is absolutely insane. And we actually got to see a lot of blood here. Honestly, if people keep complaining about the MCU not showing enough blood, I do think they should be happy with this because I think it's a step in the very right direction. I think Falcon and Winter Soldier did it well. I think they used blood to their advantage in places that they could. They didn't use it as much. I would say this episode had way more than Falcon and Winter Soldier in the first place. But then after the chase sequence, Steven actually wakes up again, which makes all of us think that that was a dream. But at the same time, later on, we do find out that Steven was actually gone for 2 days. It was actually Friday when he was supposed to like wake up, but he actually ended up waking up on Sunday. He missed his date. He missed some stuff with his job. He also found out that his fish grew 2 fins instead of just having 1 like before. And as I was watching the episode, I had this initial theory that every time he like somewhat falls asleep, Mark is the thing that takes over. But in the dream sequence, he was also Steven for a little bit, so he can't completely be Mark. Maybe he's just more vulnerable to becoming Mark in those dream sequences. Who knows? But after this point, it seems like Khonshu is kind of haunting Steven more, at least more than he was before all of the dream sequence stuff. Because now obviously it feels like Steven knows a lot more about this lore, as he did get to interact with Arthur himself. And then Ethan Hawke's character Arthur finds him in the real world at the museum, and then a lot of the workers at the museum are revealed to be part of this cult that Ethan Hawke's character is leading. And this itself builds up a lot of lore. And then we finally get that line that's been in all of the marketing where Ethan Hawke says there's chaos in you, and then everything just goes to shambles because they let out some like Egyptian creature to go and kill Steven, and then Steven's basically running away from this creature. He gets locked in a bathroom, and then he gets his first dialogue conversation with Mark, where Mark basically says you have to let go so that Mark can actually take over his body. And then obviously we kind of get this outside hallway shot. Right before this, we do get a little tease of the Moonknight suit coming on, so we know what's happening. And then they go to the outside shot. Obviously we see a sink thrown at the wall, and then we slowly zoom in, seeing Moonknight absolutely beating the crap out of this Egyptian creature. And then obviously the episode ends with the shot that a lot of the trailers ended with, which is Moonknight walking towards the camera. And this ending gives me 2 main things that I'm excited for the rest of the show, and why I think it's going to be separated from the rest of the Marvel Disney Plus shows. And the first one is that the villain isn't just going to be someone that's introduced in the final or the second to last episode like it is in all the other Marvel Disney Plus shows, because that is my biggest complaint. And that's just the formula that Marvel's been following for their MCU Disney Plus TV shows, which I really just hate. I think it works for Loki. I think it kind of worked for Hawkeye. I don't think it's going to work here, but I don't even think they're going to be going for that here, because Ethan Hawke's character already has so much stuff going for him in this first episode. I think if they keep it up or just keep him half as interesting, he'll be a great villain. But the second one, and the most important one in my opinion, is that the hero's actually going to be somewhat of the hero himself before the final episode. It seems like in all the Marvel Disney Plus TV shows, the hero is not their true hero self until the final episode, during the final battle when they come out in their new suit. I don't think that's going to be the case with this show. I think this show is going to be a full-on drama show using a superhero character and his different personalities. I don't think they're just going to be taking advantage of, okay, we can give him a new suit at the end for more action figures. He already has his suit. I think this is going to be a full-on drama show, and I think this first episode proves it. But yeah, guys, that's it for my spoiler review and breakdown for Moon Knight episode 1. If you guys are new here, make sure to subscribe and notifications on, because I'll be covering Moon Knight every single week until the show is over. Let me know what you guys thought of this season premiere for Moon Knight in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.